The report Vorith filed before landing was 3 sentences long. Earth reptiles. Cold-blooded. Low sapience index. Estimated observation time. For days. His supervisor had approved it without reading past the first line. That was how unimportant this mission was. The Galactic Conclave had cataloged 412 worlds. Earth's reptiles ranked near the bottom of everything they measured: social bonding, communication complexity, emotional range. Vorith had been assigned this job because he was thorough, not because anyone expected him to find anything. He and his junior observer, Fun, deployed the cloaked node at midnight, local time. It settled into the corner of a low brick building on the edge of a small town in the southern part of Earth's largest land continent. The sign outside read, Blue Ridge Reptile Education Center. The lights inside were off. The animals were still. Finn spent the first hour cataloging enclosures from the node sensors. 12 tanks along 2 walls. 1 corn snake, burnt orange with copper saddles. 2 bearded dragons sharing a wide enclosure with a flat rock under a heat lamp. A large ball python, thick as a human forearm, coiled in the far corner of its tank. A blue-tongued skink pressed flat against its substrate, eyes closed. All within expected behavioral parameters, Finn said, making notes. Stress markers low. Possibly sedated. Vorith marked that down. He would check if Earth Keepers used chemical calming agents on display animals. That would explain the unusual quiet. The human arrived at 7:30 in the morning. He came through the back door, not the front. He was somewhere in his 3rd decade, lean, with close-cut hair, and the particular kind of unhurried movement that came from doing the same routine so many times it had become part of the body. He wore plain work clothes and carried a bag over one shoulder. He set the bag on a low table near the center of the room and did not turn any of the overhead lights on. Just the enclosure lamps, one by one. Moving down the row, Vorith had expected the human to begin cleaning or feeding immediately. Standard animal management protocol. Instead, the human stopped at the first enclosure, the corn snake, and simply looked, not checking the animal for injury. Not logging data, just looking. Morning, russet, he said. The snake did not respond. It was a snake. It had no mechanism for response. The human moved to the bearded dragons. Same thing. He stood at the glass, watched them rouse under the warming lamp, and said their names, Burl and Fig, before moving on. He greeted the ball python. He greeted the skink. He greeted each animal the way someone greets people they're genuinely glad to see, with no performance in it, no audience to perform for. Finn had stopped writing. Vorith noticed and said nothing. The human began his cleaning routine, then, methodical and calm. He worked one enclosure at a time. When he reached into a tank, he moved slowly. He narrated to the animals as he went. Not instructions, just commentary. Water's getting changed. Yeah, I know. Hold on. He talked the way someone talks in an empty house when they're comfortable with the silence but do not mind filling it a little. Finn finally spoke. The stress markers. Vorith looked at the readings. Every reptile in the room was reading below the baseline stress index they had logged during the night. Not just the ones the human was currently near. All of them, including the skink, who was now awake and standing against the front of its enclosure, facing the room. The temperature has not changed significantly, Finn said. Lights are the same. He has not introduced food yet. There is no external stimulus that would lower cortisol output across 12 animals simultaneously. His presence, Vorith said slowly, that would require them to have a measurable stress response to his absence, and a measurable calm response to his arrival. Finn paused. That is a social recognition pattern. Reptiles do not have social recognition patterns. I know, Finn said. Vorith marked it as a data anomaly and moved on. The simplest explanation was still instrument error or an environmental variable they had not yet accounted for. The building's air circulation, perhaps. A subtle scent cue. Something mechanical. By mid-morning. The human had finished cleaning and was preparing food for the afternoon feeding. He worked at the low table near the center of the room. The corn snake, russet, was pressed against the side of its enclosure that faced the table. Not the warm side. Not the side nearest the lamp. The side nearest the human. Finn noted this without saying anything. Vorith was about to close the morning observation log when something made him pause. He scrolled back through the sensor feed from the previous night, the hours before the human arrived, and checked the corn snake's position record. During the night, Russet had been coiled at the warm end of the enclosure, near the lamp. Standard behavior, 8 to T7:23 in the morning, 7 minutes before the human entered through the back door. The snake had moved to the near side of the glass, before the lights came on, before any sound was recorded inside the building. 7 minutes before the human was even visible or audible to any standard sensory measurement. Vorith stared at the timestamp. Finn leaned over and looked at it too. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. The latch on enclosure 1, Finn said finally. I noticed it earlier. It is not fully closed. Vorith looked. The corn snake's tank. The latch was resting against the frame, but not locked down. Flag it, he said. We will see if the human notices. The human did not notice. He finished his prep work, checked his phone once, and sat down at the table with a cup of something warm, doing paperwork. Russet stayed pressed against the near side of the glass, still as a stone, watching. The children arrived in a yellow transport vehicle that made a great deal of noise pulling into the gravel lot. Vorith had seen school groups at other Earth observation sites. They were usually loud, disorganized, and stressful for any animal nearby. He had his stylus ready to log the expected fear responses, defensive posturing, retreat to enclosure corners, elevated heart rates across the board. The door opened. 23 children between the ages of 7 and 9 poured into the parking lot like water from a tipped cup. Their teacher, a tired woman with a clipboard, called after them with the exhausted authority of someone who had stopped expecting to be obeyed. Vorith readied the stress monitor. Inside the building, Dale heard the bus and stood up from his workstation. Something shifted in how he held himself. Not tense, not performative, just a quiet settling, the way a person organizes themselves before something that requires their full attention. He tucked his notes away, rolled up his left sleeve slightly, and moved to the center of the room. Then the children came in, and he smiled. IT was not the wide professional smile of someone doing a job. It was a smaller thing, the kind that reaches the eyes first. He let the noise happen around him without reacting to it. And after a few seconds, the children slowed down, almost without realizing it, and looked at him. Okay, he said, not loud. Everybody find a spot on the floor. They found spots. Mostly, he started with words. He told them about reptiles, not the textbook version, not lists of facts, but the interesting parts. How a corn snake finds heat with organs humans do not have. How a bearded dragon can recognize individual human faces. How the ball python, whose name was Wren, had been found in a box outside a gas station 3 years ago and had taken 8 months to trust being touched. Vorith listened to this and made a small note in his margin. The human is providing context for behavior that would otherwise appear random. This was not unusual. Earth educators were known to anthropomorphize animals for young audiences. Then the handling portion began. Dale brought Fig out first, the calmer of the 2 bearded dragons. He showed the children how to hold out a flat hand, how to stay still, how to breathe. One boy in the front extended his hand with every muscle rigid and his eyes shut. Dale knelt down to his level, placed Fig near the boy's knee first, let the dragon's weight register before the animal moved closer. He can feel your heartbeat through your skin, Dale said quietly. So the calmer you are, the calmer he is. You kind of do it together. Fig stepped onto the boy's knee. The boy opened one eye, then both. Finn was watching so closely that he had forgotten to log data for 6 minutes. Vorith checked his instruments. Fig's stress index had not moved. In fact, it had decreased slightly from the baseline they had logged that morning. 23 children in the room, noise levels well above anything they had measured here before, and the bearded dragon was calmer than it had been alone. He ran the check twice. The number did not change. A girl near the back dropped her plastic water bottle. It hit the floor with a sharp crack and rolled under a chair. Wren, the ball python, coiled fast and tight in one smooth motion. The classic defensive response. Expected. Logged. What happened next was not in Vorith's data set. Dale did not move toward the python's enclosure. He moved in front of it, not blocking. just placing himself between the source of the sound and the animal's line of sight. He did not touch the glass. He did not raise his voice. He simply stood there and spoke, low and even, the same tone he used when doing routine cleaning. "It's all right, Ren. Just a bottle. Nothing's coming." Finn spoke very quietly into his recorder. The python's heart rate is declining. Not gradually. It is dropping in correspondence with the cadence of the human's voice. Vorith looked at the graph. Finn was right. Each time the human spoke, there was a measurable drop. Not a coincidence of timing. A pattern. 3 words, drop. Pause. 3 words, drop. That is a conditioned response, Vorith said. To his voice, specifically, Finn said. Not to sound. The children are still making noise. Only his voice is producing this result. Vorith did not have a fast answer for that, so he wrote it down and moved on. The session lasted 2 hours. By the end, for children had held Fig, 2 had touched Ren's scales very lightly, while Dale held her. The boy who had squeezed his eyes shut was now sitting cross-legged with Fig resting across both his knees, perfectly still, wearing an expression of complete seriousness, as if he had been given a responsibility he did not intend to drop. Dale watched this from across the room. He did not draw attention to it. He just watched with that same small, real smile. When the children left, the room went quiet again. Dale cleaned up slowly, talking to the animals as he went. Russet, still in the enclosure, had not moved from the near side of the glass all morning. Finn pulled up the position log. The corn snake has been in that position for 19 hours now. Vorith looked at the latch again, still resting against the frame, still not locked. The human still has not noticed, Finn said. That night, at 11:42, Russet pushed the latch open. The snake moved out of the enclosure slowly, dropped to the shelf below, then to the floor. It moved along the baseboard without hurry, past the other enclosures, toward the center of the darkroom. That IT did not go to any heat source. It did not go toward food. That IT went to the leg of Dale's workstation, coiled at the base, and stayed there. Vorith stared at the thermal map for a long time. The workstation had no heat lamp, no warm pipe behind it, no ambient warmth above the room average. There was nothing at that spot that a reptile should logically want. Nothing except that it was where the human spent most of his time. Dale found the empty enclosure at 7:15, that he had come the same way he always did, back door, bag over one shoulder, lights on one by one down the row. He got a Russet's tank and stopped. His hand, which had been reaching for the latch, stayed in the air for a moment. Then he set his bag down carefully, crouched, and looked into every corner of the enclosure. Nothing. He straightened up and stood very still for a few seconds, thinking. Then he began to search. Vorith had prepared for this. He expected the human to call someone, another worker, a supervisor, possibly an emergency contact. He expected tools, traps, some form of large-scale response. When animals escaped from observed facilities on other worlds, the reaction was almost always the same. Alert, mobilize, contain. Dale did none of that. He moved through the room slowly, methodically, checking places with the quiet focus of someone who had done this before and knew that rushing made it worse. Behind the low cabinet near the door, along the back wall where the pipes ran, under the table. He talked as he went, not loudly, almost to himself. "Okay, you're in here somewhere. It's cold near the door, so probably not there. Probably not near the drainage either. You hate that smell." He crouched to look under a shelf. "Russet, come on, give me something." Finn had stopped pretending to log data. He was watching with both hands on the observation console, leaning forward. Vorith found himself leaning forward too and straightened up. The search went on for 31 minutes. Dale checked every corner, every gap, every space where a 3-foot snake could fit. He was thorough but not frantic. Each time he did not find anything, he simply moved to the next place without frustration, recalculating, thinking it through. Then he stopped searching. He went to his workstation, sat down on the floor in front of it, not in his chair on the actual floor, and stretched his arm out along the baseboard. Palm up, elbow resting on the ground. Warm and still and relaxed, he waited. What was he doing? Finn asked. Vorith did not answer because he was not sure. The thermal sensors showed Russet behind the secondary heating unit near the far wall. The snake had been there since approximately 3 in the morning. It had not moved in over 4 hours. Its body temperature was stable, not too low, not dangerously cold. The snake did not need rescuing. It was fine where it was. And yet 0.8 minutes passed. Dale did not move. He scrolled through something on his phone with his free hand, unhurried, giving the room time to settle back into quiet. The enclosure lamps hummed. The bearded dragons shifted under their basking light. The room was ordinary. At the 39-minute mark, Russet emerged, not fast, not urgently. The snake came out from behind the heating unit the way it did everything, with the slow, deliberate movement of a creature that sees no reason to hurry. It crossed the floor along the baseboard, past the ball python's enclosure, past the skink, and moved toward the workstation. IT found Dale's arm and coiled there. Not a tight coil. Loose, easy, the way the snake rested in its enclosure when it was most comfortable. Its head rested on Dale's wrist. It stopped moving. Dale looked down at it for a moment. He did not whoop or jump or make any large reaction. He just exhaled, one slow breath, and said very quietly, "There you are." Gave me a scare. Then he sat on the floor with his snake for a while, not rushing to put it back, not checking it for injury immediately, just sitting with it on the observation console. Every single instrument went sideways at once. Russet's heart rate, which had been low and steady in its resting position behind the heater, dropped further the moment it made contact with Dale's arm. Not to an alarming level, to the lowest stress reading a living snake could produce while awake. Its muscle tension fell. Its thermal regulation smoothed out. Every biological marker they had for comfort or safety bottomed out at its best possible value. Finn stared at the numbers. These readings are not physically possible for a free-moving animal. They are apparently possible for this one, Vorith said. It chose to go back, Finn said. Not as a question, Vorith looked at the thermal map from the previous night. Russet had spent 8 hours on the floor near the workstation instead of in its heated enclosure. It had chosen a room temperature floor next to a human chair over a carefully regulated tank with perfect heat and humidity. And then, when it finally left that spot, it had gone behind a heater, not out the door, not to any of the other heat sources in the room, and waited. Waited until the human came in, then came out and went to him. Vorith picked up his recorder. He stayed quiet for a moment, organizing his thoughts, then spoke carefully. Flag this as a priority report. The animal did not escape. It relocated voluntarily to a position associated with the human, waited through the night and into the morning, and then returned to the human upon his arrival. He paused. This is not escape behavior. This is not heat-seeking behavior. I do not currently have a category for what this is. He flagged the report and sent it up the line to Director Saul on the ship above. Saul's response came back in under 10 minutes. Instrument error. Check calibration. Rerun baseline. Vorith checked the calibration. It was fine. He reran the baseline. The numbers held. He did not argue with Saul yet. But he did not erase the flag. Below, Dale was still sitting on the floor. Russet had not moved from his arm. Outside the windows, the morning was getting brighter, and the first car had just turned into the gravel lot. A volunteer arriving for the day. Dale looked at the door, then back at his snake, then very gently lifted his arm and carried Russet back to the enclosure. He latched it properly this time, both hands, making sure the click was solid. "Stay in there today," he said. Russet pressed against the near side of the glass, watching him the way it always did. Director Saul's face on the subspace screen looked the way it always looked, like a person who had already decided the answer before hearing the question. "You are telling me," Saul said, "that a cold-blooded reptile with no social bonding architecture waited for a specific human to arrive, then crawled onto him voluntarily because it wanted to?" "I am telling you that is what the data shows," Vorith said. "The data shows an instrument error. I calibrated the instruments myself this morning. Twice. Then you are misreading the data." Vorith kept his voice level. "Director, the thermal map shows the animal spent 8 hours at room temperature rather than returned to its heated enclosure. Its biological markers reached their lowest stress values exclusively in physical contact with this human. This pattern has now appeared across multiple animals in the facility. So lean back. Every reading you are describing has a simpler explanation. The snake is attracted to the human's body heat. The other animals have been conditioned by repeated handling to not show fear responses. You're watching a calibration exercise, Vorith. Stop looking for a story that isn't there. The screen went dark. Vorith sat with the quiet for a moment. Then he picked up his stylus and wrote one line in his personal log. We'll run heat source control test this afternoon. He told Finn the plan. Finn pulled up the room's thermal map from that morning, and they identified 3 points in the facility with ambient temperatures within 1 degree of a human's external skin temperature. The pipe alcove near the back wall, the shelf above the reptile food storage, and a corner near the front window where the afternoon sun hit the tile floor directly. All 3 were warmer than Dale's workstation. All 3 were warmer than his body. That afternoon, Dale conducted Russet's weekly free roam session. He set the snake on the floor of the room, which was standard practice, enrichment, and exercise. Russet spent approximately 4 minutes moving along the baseboard. It passed the pipe alcove. It passed the food storage shelf. It ignored the warm tile near the window entirely. It went to Dale's feet and coiled there. Finn logged it without a word. Vorith let 15 minutes pass, then asked Dale, through the observation node's environmental speakers, which they had never used before, which made Finn go completely rigid with alarm. No, he did not do that. He was not authorized to make contact. He watched, but he watched everything. He watched Russet's head tilt upward when Dale shifted in his chair. He watched the snake adjust its position each time Dale's foot moved, not in avoidance, but in a kind of slow tracking, always maintaining contact. He watched Dale reach down once and let 2 fingers rest along the snake's back for a moment, the way someone touches a sleeping animal they do not want to wake. Vorith scrolled back through the observation buffer. He found 17 previous free roam sessions. In each one, he tracked Russet's final resting position. Every time, without exception, within the first 10 minutes, the snake ended up within 12 inches of wherever Dale was in the room. Not the heat sources. Not the food. Not the other humans who occasionally helped with sessions, Dale. 17 instances, Vorith said, over a period of 4 months. That is not conditioning, Finn said quietly. Conditioning produces a response to a stimulus. This is a preference, an active, repeated preference. Vorith pulled out his terminology guide, the Conclave's official behavioral classification index, 43rd edition. He worked through it methodically, looking for the correct category. Imprinting. Incorrect. Imprinting was fixed during a developmental window and did not show active tracking behavior in adult animals. Dependency bond. Incorrect. Dependency bonds appeared in animals that could not self-regulate. Russet was healthy, well-fed, fully capable of self-care. Territorial association. Incorrect. The snake showed no defensive behavior around Dale and made no attempt to exclude others from a space. He kept going through the index. Nothing fit cleanly. He tried combining categories. He tried applying frameworks from social species and adjusting them for solitary reptile behavior. He tried working backward from the behavioral data to see if any existing model could produce the pattern he was observing. Nothing held. He closed the index and sat looking at his notes. What do we call it? Finn asked. Vorith thought about this for a long time. Long enough that Finn stopped waiting for an immediate answer and went back to logging the afternoon data. Long enough that outside, the building the shadows had shifted and the warm patch on the tile near the window had moved 6 inches east. Russet was still at Dale's feet. Chosen kinship, Vorith said finally. Finn looked up. The animal was not forced into this proximity. It was not lured. It was not conditioned into a stimulus response. It has, over a period of months, in repeated and consistent circumstances, chosen to be near this specific human. And the human has responded in kind, with patience, with recognition, with what I can only describe as consideration for the animal's comfort. Vorith paused. That is a relationship. A simple one, but a real one. Finn was quiet for a moment. The Conclave Index has no entry for a relationship between a human and a reptile. No, Vorith said. It does not. He opened a new document. He titled it, Revised Behavioral Report. Earth Reptiles Study, Blue Ridge Facility. And then, below the title, he wrote a subtitle that he suspected was going to cause him significant professional difficulty. IT read, Earth humans do not keep reptiles. They are in relationship with them. He looked at it. Then he sent it to Director Saul. Saul's reply came back in 4 minutes. Retract this immediately. Vorth read it once. Then he closed the message, set his recorder on the console, and watched Dale lock up for the evening. Russet was back in the enclosure, latched tight. Dale tapped the glass once before turning the lamp down for the night. The snake pressed against the near side. Vorth did not retract the report. The message from Observer Unit 7 came in at midnight, ship time. Vorth was still awake. He had not slept well in 3 days. He read the message twice, then forwarded it to Fun without comment. Unit 7 was stationed at a coastal research facility 1,200 kilometers west of Blue Ridge. They had been monitoring a marine biology center for 2 weeks, focused on Earth sea turtles. Routine study. The observer in charge had flagged Vorth's report that afternoon and had spent the following hours reviewing their own footage with different eyes. Their message contained 6 attached files. Each file was a separate incident. A human marine biologist who had worked with the same loggerhead turtle during its rehabilitation for 9 months. The turtle, which had full mobility and could have moved to any section of the recovery pool, consistently positioned itself against the side of the pool nearest the researcher. When the researcher was absent, it moved to the center. When she returned, it moved back. Second file, a human wildlife rehabilitator in the northern continent, working with a Gila monster, a species the Conclave had classified as one of Earth's most asocial reptiles, a creature with no recorded case of voluntary approach to a human in the wild. The Gila monster in the file walked to the edge of its enclosure and waited each morning before the rehabilitator arrived. The rehabilitator was always the first person in. The timing of the Gila monster's movement to the enclosure edge preceded her arrival by an average of 11 minutes. Vorth read this and set the report down. He picked it up again, 0.11 minutes. Third file was shorter. A private home. An older human, male, who kept 3 large Argentine black and white tegus. The tegus, which were large enough and fast enough to leave the yard entirely if they chose, spent their outdoor time following the human at a distance of roughly 1 meter. Not constantly, not intrusively, just there, the way a quiet companion is there. Close enough to be present. By the time Vorth reached the 6th file, Finn had appeared in the doorway of the observation room with a cup of something warm and an expression that meant he had also been reading. How many stations have flagged this pattern? Vorth asked, after your report went up. 14. Finn sat down. 3 flagged it before your report, but had not filed because they thought they were misreading the data. Your report gave them something to compare against. Vorth leaned back. 14 stations and counting. The cold climate station in the north sent a file 20 minutes ago. A human keeping a tegu in a city apartment. The animal sleeps against the human's legs at night. They measured it. Every night. Against the legs, not near the heat mat. Not near the window, against the legs. Vorth was quiet for a moment. Saul is going to call it mass instrument error. Probably, Finn said. But 14 stations would require 14 simultaneous instrument failures of identical type. That argument does not hold very long. The emergency review was called for the following morning. 12 senior observers across 5 monitoring regions attended by Subspace Link. Director Saul opened it by stating, flatly, that this discussion should last no more than 30 minutes and result in a unanimous decision to expand the study boundaries and rerun all baseline calibrations before drawing any further conclusions. That IT lasted 4 hours. Observer after observer played their footage. Not just the 6 files from Unit 7. 17 observers now had comparable data. Wildlife rehabilitation centers, private keepers, zoological facilities, remote farms where humans kept monitor lizards and iguanas and tortoises. In every environment, with every species, the same impossible pattern repeated itself. Animals that the Conclave's own index listed as non-social, non-bonding, and instinct-driven were showing consistent, voluntary, repeated preference for specific individual humans. Saul pushed back on every point. Conditioning, habituation, anthropomorphism in the observers. She was not wrong to be skeptical. These were legitimate scientific concerns. But by the third hour, even she had gone quiet, watching the footage from the Unit 7 loggerhead turtle as it repositioned itself in the recovery pool, moving toward the researcher's shadow on the water before the researcher herself had even stepped fully into view. The vote at the end was not about whether to continue the study. That was decided quickly. The real vote was about classification. Earth had been listed as Category 3, primitive biosphere, for 60 years. Category 3 meant the dominant species was advanced enough to be observed, but not advanced enough to be considered for contact. It was a bureaucratic label, and it carried a great deal of weight. 0.7 observers voted to reclassify, 0.5 abstained. Saul voted against. 0.7 was enough. Earth was reclassified, effective immediately, to Category Unknown. Requires new framework. It was only the second time in conclave history that classification had been changed to unknown. The first had been a world that turned out to have been in contact with 3 other civilizations already. That afternoon, Vorith went back to the observation node and watched Dale work. A new volunteer had come in, a teenager, maybe 15, wearing a dark jacket with their hood up, standing near the door with their arms crossed. Body language of someone who had been told to be here and was not sure they wanted to be. Dale clocked the teenager's posture immediately. He did not approach. He went about his routine, talking about the animals at normal volume, not directing anything at the teenager specifically, just filling the space with information. After about 20 minutes, the teenager's arms came uncrossed. After 40, they had drifted closer to the enclosures. After an hour, they were sitting on the floor near Russet's tank while Dale explained, slowly and without pressure, that corn snakes have no interest in hurting anyone, that they explore with their tongues, that the smell of a calm person feels safe to them. To the end of the session, Dale held Russet out at a low angle. The teenager extended the back of their hand, stiff and uncertain. Russet rested the front quarter of its body across their knuckles and stayed there. The teenager went completely still. "She picked you," Dale said. "She doesn't do that with everyone." It was not exactly true. Russet was a calm snake by nature. But Vorith understood why Dale said it. He was giving the teenager something to hold on to, a reason to come back. Fa made a note. Subject extends relational capacity outward. He does not only bond. He teaches bonding. Vorith read the note and added it to the report he titled the new section, "The Circle Expands." He was beginning to understand that this was the thing the Conclave had missed entirely. It was not just that humans bonded with reptiles. It was that humans taught each other to bond with reptiles. They passed the skill along. They widened the circle, one hesitant teenager at a time, one flat hand extended toward a calm snake, until the boundary between human and not human became something negotiable, something that could be crossed. He sent the updated report up the line and did not wait for Saul's response. 3 months after the first observation log, one of the bearded dragons died. His name was Burl. He was 7 years old, which Vorith had learned was old for his species. He had slowed down over the past few weeks. Less movement, less interest in food, more time pressed flat against the warm rock, eyes half closed. Dale had taken him to an animal doctor twice. The second time, he came home alone. Vorith had seen death in observation data before. Animals died in facilities. Observers logged it, noted the keeper's response, usually professional, sometimes distressed, and moved on. It was not considered significant data that he was not prepared for what he recorded that morning. Dale came in earlier than usual. He went straight to Burl's enclosure, which was empty and had been cleaned out the night before. He stood in front of the empty tank for a while, without moving. Then he went out the back door. Vorith switched to the external sensor. Dale was in the small garden space behind the building, a strip of ground between the brick wall and a wooden fence. He had a small box. He dug a hole in the corner near the fence, unhurried, steady. He placed the box in the hole and covered it. He did not say anything out loud. He stood there for a few minutes with his hands at his sides. Then he went back inside. He opened Fig's enclosure, the remaining bearded dragon, and did not take her out. He just sat beside the enclosure on the floor, close enough that Fig could see him clearly. Fig walked to the edge of her basking rock and stayed there, facing him. Neither of them moved for 20 minutes. Vorith's instruments registered everything. The slight elevation in Dale's skin temperature that was consistent with what Earth medical literature called grief response. The slower breathing. The particular stillness of someone who is not doing nothing, who is doing the difficult, invisible work of feeling something and not running from it, he said, very quietly, to Fig or to no one. Still got you. Fig did not move, but she stayed facing him until he finally stood up and began the morning routine. Vorith sat in the observation room for a long time after that. He did not write anything for almost an hour. Fun, who had watched the same feed, did not speak either. There are things that require silence before they can be properly named. Eventually, Vorith opened a blank document and began writing his final report. He did not write it as a scientific paper. He wrote it as an argument because he had decided that the conclave needed to hear an argument, not another table of data. They had enough data. What they did not yet have was understanding that he wrote. The conclave sent this mission to study Earth reptiles. We studied them. We found them to be precisely as our index predicted: cold-blooded, instinct-driven, solitary, non-social. Every classification we assigned was accurate. What we did not expect was the human. Earth humans have extended their capacity for relationship across a boundary that no other species in our database has ever crossed voluntarily. They did not cross it because they had to. Reptiles offer humans nothing measurable in return. No labor, no protection, no social signaling of significant value. A corn snake cannot be trained to perform tasks. A bearded dragon cannot warn of danger. A ball python offers no resource that could not be obtained another way. And yet, across 17 observed sites, in conditions ranging from professional facilities to private homes, in every climate zone we have monitored, we found the same thing. Humans sitting on floors to let nervous animals come to them. Humans spending months building trust with creatures that cannot say the word trust. Humans grieving animals that the conclave's own index lists as non-sentient. Humans teaching other humans to extend the same patience, the same stillness, the same willingness to be present with something that is very different from themselves. The animals respond. Not because they have been engineered to, not because they have any instinctive framework for this kind of relationship. They respond because the humans are consistent. They show up every day. They speak with the same voice. They move with the same care. And eventually, even an animal with no social bonding architecture learns one simple thing. This particular presence means safety that we spent 60 years classifying Earth as Category 3. We were looking at the wrong species. The reptiles are not the story. The reptiles are the evidence. The story is a species that looked at a cold-blooded, unresponsive, instinct-driven creature and decided, not through reason, not through utility, but through some quality we do not yet have a word for, that it was worth knowing, that it deserved patience, that the distance between human and not human was a place worth crossing, that if they do this with reptiles, there's only one question worth asking. What would they do for species who are dismissed? For worlds that have been written off? For civilizations that the conclave looked at once, assigned a category number, and moved on from? We are not ready to answer that question. But I submit that we should be asking it very seriously before we consider whether to make contact with Earth. Because I am no longer certain that we are the ones who will be deciding the terms of that meeting. Vorith sent the report. He did not wait for the response this time. He closed the console and watched the last hour of the day through the observation node. Dale was locking up. He moved through the room the way he always did, steady and unhurried, turning down the lamps one by one, checking latches, filling water where it was low. He stopped at Russet's enclosure last. He tapped the glass once. A single knock, his nightly goodbye. Russet lifted her head from the coil, held it up for a moment, then settled back down. Dale turned off the last lamp and went out the back door. On the ship above, in a quiet office 3 decks below the bridge, a new file was opened. It carried no fanfare. No announcement was sent. A single administrator entered the working title, flagged it for senior review, and closed the window. The file read, Earth, Preliminary First Contact Review. Status, pending. For the first time in 60 years of Earth observation, someone in the conclave had typed the word contact and not immediately deleted it. They were not ready. They knew they were not ready. But for the first time, they were genuinely unsure whether that mattered, or whether Earth had already decided something about the universe that the rest of the galaxy was only beginning to catch up to.